Hello and welcome to yet another insightful edition of Business Summit. I'm Eunice Pereginodati. In this episode, we'll be looking at how agribusiness can be enhanced to increase household incomes and the interventions brought to you from the USAID and the Agribusiness and Trade Promotion Project. We'll take it off from there after this quick break. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us and welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching Business Summit. In today's episode, we're going to introduce to you shortly the Chief of Party from the ATP, that's the Agribusiness and Trade Promotion Project. He's in the person of Dr. Ishmael Ouedraogo. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
We're glad to have you here, and we're interested in talking to you about the Trade and Promotions Project that you're heading in Ghana, and how that is enhancing household incomes within the agribusiness environment. So welcome again, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we want to find out, what is ATP all about, within the SAP region? What is the project about?
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell your audience about who we are, what we do, and how what we do have an impact on many people's lives here in Ghana and in West Africa.
Good.
You said our program is a U.S. government initiative funded by its Agency for International Development, USAID, to provide support to the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to implement the community's program and its agricultural policy. Our program is a regional program which is tasked to basically facilitate trade in the region. Our mandate is to increase the volume and value of inter-regional trade in selected commodities. We're talking about maize, livestock, onion. We're talking about millet, sorghum, rice, poultry.
I see. So, how extensive is this project we're talking about? You talked about ECOWAS, you talked about intra-West African trade. Which countries are you focused in, and what specific facilitating activities are you engaged in to provide support to the agribusiness environment?
Actually, when we talk about ATP, we are talking about two operations, of which two contracts. One is ATP and the second is expanded ATP. But operationally, they're just the same.
Okay.
We share the same headquarters here in Accra, the same technical office in Ouedraogo, Burkina Faso. And the two combined, we cover 8 countries, from Senegal to Nigeria, going through Mali, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, and Benin.
I see.
And then the two combined, as I said, cover 6 value chains that I just named before.
Okay, so ATP is basically a facilitator. So how do you facilitate processes within agribusiness environment?
Yes, indeed, we are facilitating trade within the region. What we do, we of course have our strategy, but if you want us to tell about the tools that we use,
correct,
we go about hosting trade events, workshops, in which we invite stakeholders from different countries. And then these stakeholders have the opportunity to meet with others from different countries, and we help them set up business linkages.
Okay.
And sometimes, or many times, they go into contract, and we help set up the contract at the same time. In specific instances, we host trade events, like promoting sheep export from Burkina Faso to Ghana, hosting trade events to promote onions from Burkina Faso to Cote d'Ivoire. And then we also have a market information website where we can ask businesses to post bids and offers, which now are viewed in the region, and they can get calls to try to strike deals among themselves.
Okay, I'm interested in how this, marketing facility, putting bids and offers across on the internet. Can you expatiate a little bit on that so that viewers can also understand and tap into that knowledge and utilize it effectively?
Market information we have is hosted by a private company called Esoko Networks, based here in Ghana. We are helping this network in 4 countries, here in Ghana, in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Cote d'Ivoire. So we collect prices, we get the contact of the users, and the bids and offers have these contacts. And then when you see a bid and offer, then you can call the particular person, knowing the contact, to see if you can track a deal. This is a system that works both through the internet and with cell phones.
Okay.
Meaning that you can ask for the prices using your cell phone. You also can set up, if you will, preferences. So you will get alerts to tell you the price of different commodities in different markets
times
in the region.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So what we gather from what you do is that you provide or facilitate activities along the value chains from start to finish. Would you want to talk a bit about the strategies you employ along these value chains that you provide support for?
Exactly. We are trying to be focused on the value chain that we are working on. The value chains, as you said, go from the input supply to production to processing, transportation to distribution. At the same time, what we do is work with the stakeholders to see where are the major constraints, and specifically, where is what we can do as a project with the time limited to really have an impact. So in cases, we can highlight the fact that the problem in storage. Other cases, there will be a question of training for farmers to be more productive. Other cases, there would be transformation, processing. Then this is how we are able to tackle the issues. And at each instance, what we try to do is make sure that our intervention would lead to trade within the region.
Okay.
And this is how we are looking at the value chain approach.
Okay, so within this value chain approach, you mentioned earlier on about value and volumes. Can you talk a bit about the value that you're adding in terms of processes or activities, along the same value chains that we're talking about? And the volumes, has your intervention been able to make any difference so far in terms of the volumes of trade along the West African sub-region with regards to those specific commodities that you talked about?
Yeah, that would be one of the things that we are, I think, proud of. We have been able to show that through our interventions, the value of trade, when you look at the aggregate, at least on the ATP side, for the year 2010, which ended September 30th, we have been able to show that trade has increased to $352 million. When we compare that to what we call the baseline, when we started, we can see an increase of 50%.
That's about what number of, how many years?
From 2008 to 2010.
That's just 2-year period.
Exactly. Now, the value added, as I said, in cases like processing, we help processors to buy products of good quality. We are training, say, livestock producers to fasten their animals. They can get a better value for their animals. Okay. We have trained butchers on how to cut meat, because the way you cut meat, as you realize, when you go to the supermarket, you look for the better cuts than the other ones. Not just the meat that is just there with bones and so on and so forth. So this is important if you want to add value to what you do. So those are the kind of things we do. And we also do training for producers to increase the productivity and then add value to what they are going to sell.
Okay, whilst we're talking, you mentioned, some of the value chains as being transportation. We know how difficult it is for farmers to transport their goods from one point to the other, let alone across borders. Now, what has the ATP done so far, or is doing, to facilitate the issue of transportation, effective transportation from the producer to the ultimate user?
Yeah, this is one of the major headaches traders, transporters, truckers face when they move products from one country to the other. We are working very hard to see how we can reduce the incidence of what we call road harassment.
Okay.
We understand transportation by itself is very important. It has to do with the roads, it has to do with the trucks and so forth. But we are working on the facilitation side. So what we have been able to achieve, and with a good success, is to show that when you coach transporters, truckers, tell them what are their rights and obligations, and tell them how they have to behave when they come across agents, they are able to make sure that they don't pay as much as they would have. If you want, I can give you some idea of what has happened in this year. As I was saying, ended September 30th.
Okay.
If you look at the total trade that was in onions coming into Ghana, we have something like 75,000 tons. The total bribes paid on this volume would have been something close to $1 million for the year.
Really?
Exactly. But from what we did with the truckers, we've been able, may say it's not important, but still is for them. We've been able to get them to save $175,000. So basically, they are paid not $1 million, but something like $880,000. And for them, it's very significant. If you look at it, with this harassment, it adds to the cost of transportation. And when you squeeze the margin from traders, what they do is try to shift some of the cost to consumers, prices
Definitely.
go up, and they will try to bid down the price paid to producers. So both at the end of the spectrum lose. So it tells you that it's very important that we continue to work on road harassment. And then we continue to make sure that transporters know how to behave and continue reducing this incidence of road harassment.
That's a good note on which we can take a quick commercial break. We'll be back shortly. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. If you just joined us, you're watching Business Summit. And we are introducing today's episode, Agri-business, and how the USAID Agri-business and Trade Promotion is facilitating agribusiness across West Africa. Thank you. We're here with Dr. Ishmael Ouedraogo.
Thank you.
And he's the Chief of Party of the ATP. So before we went on break, we were talking about how you facilitated some of the value chains, processes along the value chains. And you talked about truck drivers and how, the problems they encounter on the road transporting products from one country to the other across the borders, and how you have undertaken coaching activities to ensure that they pay less in bribes and they are able to, they are more empowered right now in terms of knowing what information to have on them and how to relate to people across the borders. But I'm sure in all this you might have employed advocacy approaches to be able to, address this issue for this kind of outcome. You talked about the reduction in the payment of bribes, which is quite impressive. Advocacy, how has that facilitated the work of ATP since, its operations?
The advocacy indeed is an important element and also constraint. We have realized that the private sector doesn't really have an effective way to do advocacy.
Right.
So one of the things we are doing under the project is to build the capacity of private sector to do more effective advocacy. And we do it along the value chains. we have realized that depending on the value chain, you could have a different way of looking at advocacy, or, if you will, certain set of impediments that we would like to address. So we do this coaching, as I said. We also do road shows where we get those drivers, the private sector, and the public sectors, meaning the corrupt officials. Some of them belong, as you know, to the police and customs and so on and so forth. So we bring them in one setting, and we let the two sides tell each other what's going wrong. And we're doing it over and over. And this has an impact now on the way both can interact with one another. So that's some of the things we do on the onion side. For the rest of the value chains, for example, on livestock, we have seen that they have problems when they transit the animals, for example, from Mali to Burkina Faso and Ghana. They're not supposed to pay transit, but they do it in both countries.
Oh.
In the case of Mali, we have seen that some are being asked for authorization to export, which is just an impediment.
Okay.
It shouldn't be. For cereals, one of the major problems people are facing is still the bans on export from time to time. So we are also working with them to see how we can eliminate or reduce the incidence of these bans. So this is about the advocacy we work on along the value chains. And again, we're expecting that by the end of the project, the private sector would have gained understanding on how to conduct advocacy by themselves.
Oh.
And this is something that would be, or if you will, or legacy, something sustainable.
I see. Now you talked about cereals. We're talking about onions and sheep and all that. Food security. How does this impact on food security across the West African sub-region? Because when you talk about cereals, you mean maize and rice and sorghum and other cereals like that.
Right.
Food security is key, and we know how food shortages are affecting us within the sub-region. So how has your operations affected, facilitated, promoted food security as a result of all these interventions that you're promoting?
Yeah, that's very important. Actually, one of the programs we are working under is funded under the U.S. President's initiative called Feed the Future, which is about food security. When we say we are increasing international trade, you may ask, why are we doing so? Let me give you 3 important reasons why it's important.
Okay.
When you increase international trade, you open up markets for local products. And then when you expand the demand for local products, you provide more revenues to farmers. When you increase interregional trade, you provide more opportunities to business people. And when you get business people to be in relationship across countries, you are creating wealth in each of the countries where they are involved. And you're also contributing to regional integration, which you know is very important, can also bring peace.
Correct.
And then finally, when you increase interregional trade, it means you are moving foodstuff
From one place to the other.
from producing areas to consuming centers across countries. And when you make food more easily available, then you contribute to food security. Okay. And this is how we are looking at our contribution to food security in our project. And of course, when we do the training, we get producers to increase their productivity, they produce more. This is also enhancing food security. When we also work to increase the quality of the cereals, for example, to reduce the level of aflatoxin contamination, which is a chemical that really has a bad negative impact. This is also going to enhance food security.
Looks like your project is addressing in a more holistic way, agribusiness at various levels. Now, one key factor which affects most businesses, and I'm sure that pertains even more seriously with agribusiness, is lack of financing. So, are you also providing anything within that area in terms of facilitating access to finance for agribusiness people?
Yeah, I think here the key, as you said, is facilitate access to finance. We do not provide credit in the project. But what we try to do is work with the private sector, the stakeholders, for them to have better access to finance.
Okay.
It would mean getting them to be in contact with banks, working also the banks, because some of them do not know or are afraid to work with agribusinesses. And then we are working with them, the stakeholders, to produce business plans that would help them have access to credit. And then when we have traders coming from Burkina Faso, Mali to Ghana, selling their products, getting CDs, we are helping them to get the transfer of funds from the CDs to the CFR. So this is how we are helping in terms of access to finance.
Okay, so we want to talk about, we're running out of time here, but success stories are key to us because we want people to realize how realistic and real some of these projects are, because for a lot of people it's like, well, it's for them and not for us. We want to tell people that, yes, this is real, and we want to ask you to tell us some of the successes you've been able to chalk so far, your achievements to date in terms of implementing the ATP.
One of our initial success story really has to do with a woman, a Ghanaian woman, you may know the name, Ouedraogo, that you may have heard.
Mm-hmm.
She came to our workshops, listened to what we're doing, interacted with our experts, and also stakeholders from different regions. And then she said she got the idea, this is something in there for her to do. As you know, she is coming from the university in sociology. Nobody would have thought that Elon would have gone into...
A degree holder from the university will want to go into trade.
Exactly. And you know now where she is. I mean, she won the UN prize, for Millennium Development Goal, hosted by Nestle. And recently, in October, she was among the 40 under 40 award here in this country and for the whole of Africa. So this is something we are really proud, to see that, if you will, our graduate has now become that powerful example of a young entrepreneur here in Ghana and also in Africa. In the poultry value chain, we have realized something we're really proud of, which is to have Cote d'Ivoire and Burkina Faso lift the ban on poultry exports that was set up in 2006 after the avian influenza outbreak. How did we do that? Through advocacy, through working with the poultry associations, working with the authorities in both countries. And as I said, at the end they decided that this ban is no longer needed. There was no avian influenza outbreak any longer in the two countries. And this is, it happened this year. And now we are trying to get the same thing happen between Ghana and Burkina Faso, Ghana and Togo, to really make sure that within the region, there's no more ban on poultry trade in the country.
Thank you so much. We just ran out of time, but we really appreciate your coming, and we hope that one day sometime we'll be able to delve more into some of the things you've done and to showcase more pictorially some of the benefits you have, or some of the features and processes you'll be able to facilitate across the value chains. Thank you so much for watching. We are glad you stayed with us. And we want to say thank you to our sponsors. We want to say a big thank you to the Export Development and Investment Fund, that is EDIF, Alio Beauty Palace, Mirage Royal Hotel, Business and Financial Times, Business Times Magazine, Ultimate Advertising, and Local Fuel Systems. Thank you so much for staying with us, and see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.